So, um, here's Caitlin, Caitlin McWilliams. She's our specialist speech and language therapist, and she's going to be presenting today. Welcome, Caitlin.
Hi, thanks, Kerry. Thanks for the introductions. As Kerry said, I'm one of the speech and language therapists at ATtherapy. I've been with ATtherapy for a couple of years now, and I'll just tell you a little bit about my caseload, just so you know a bit more about me. So I work with clients with AAC, AAC needs, and also some with SEMH needs as well. So I've got quite a nice variety of clients on my caseload. And of course, I see them in lots of different settings as well. So I spend a lot of times in schools, at home, and then out and about in the community as well. So we thought that this topic for the webinar today would be really useful to support communication in all of those different contexts. Hopefully it will give a nice little flavour about some fundamental things you can do to support communication in lots of different ways. You may well have come across some of these strategies before, and if so, that's great. This will be a nice chance to consolidate some of those strategies, but hopefully there'll be one or two things in here as well that maybe you've not considered before. Okay, Kerry, could we have the next slide, please? So we're going to be talking about, well, starting off with communication today, just why it's important and what we mean when we talk about it. We'll look a little bit at the language development pyramid and how that looks. And then we'll think a bit about functional communication and three kind of core principles to support that. And then we'll move on to the beef of the presentation, which will be those 20 strategies to support communication. So let's start off with the basics. So what is communication? This isn't a trick question. I'm not trying to trick you out of this, but if you could just have a little think and just pop something in the chat box. I think I should be able to see it. Yes, I can see that. So one or two things. What does communication mean to you? Whether that's speech as an example, interactions between people. Oh, lovely. They're all coming through now. So interaction between people, ability to voice your thoughts, needs, and opinions to others, two-way interaction between two or more people. Lovely. Yes. So there's lots of different ways to define communication, but I think let's start off with this list here. You could just do that for us, Kerry, please. So I've defined it here as the sharing of information through any means, which could include speech, writing, gesture, natural gesture, body language, facial expressions, vocalizations, objects of reference, pictures, symbols, or photographs, texting, which kind of links back to writing, and signing. These are just some of the many ways that we communicate. We obviously have lots of different ways outside of this as well. But if we move on to the next slide, I think that might resonate with a couple of you there who talked about interaction in that definition. So that this is a slightly less academic definition, but I really liked this one, that communication is a social connection. So connection is the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued. And I really like this. I think as speech and language therapists, obviously we all believe communication is really important. That's why we do it as our job. But I just really liked that aspect about feeling seen, heard, and valued. I think it just shows you how important it is. So there's this quote from Martin Pistorius, who's a South African author. He wrote Ghost Boy. So he had a period of time when he was younger with locked-in syndrome, and these are his words. I would like you to all stop for a moment and really think about not having a voice or any means to communicate. My computer voice says, you could never say, pass the salt, or tell someone the really important things like I love you. You can't tell someone that you're uncomfortable, cold, or in pain. So Martin there, he's identified quite a few different functions of communication there, which I really like. So he's mentioned that you can't make requests or directions like pass the salt, or those social messages that are really important to us, like telling someone that you love them, and really functional things as well. So you can't tell someone that you're in pain, and for parents and teachers and things, that can be really important, that we are able to understand our clients and kind of get that message across. So if we move on to the next slide, I just wanted to touch on what we mean when we talk about receptive and expressive language. Some of you will know these terms already, but we talk about this a lot within speech and language therapy. So when we talk about receptive language, that's everything that's going in. So it's all about understanding language, understanding the speech, understanding signs, facial expressions, visuals, and then interpreting those. And that all falls under the understanding of it. Then related, but it kind of separately, we can think about expressive language. And that's everything that's coming out. So as I'm doing now, I'm speaking, I'm also signing, but you actually probably can't see that underneath the camera, using lots of kind of natural gesture, body movements, facial expressions, using eye gaze, eye direction, eye pointing, and things like intensive interaction as well. And that all comes under using language. So when we think about development of language, you might have seen this pyramid before. I've jumbled up these different parts of the pyramid on one side. So I want us to just think about how we might develop this in a useful way, and think about what might be the most foundational level of this pyramid. So any guesses with what? We're just going to do the bottom and the top one. So what do you think out of those 6 options on the side is the most fundamental option there on the bottom? What's going to be at the bottom of our pyramid?
Caitlin, would it be helpful for people to pop it into the chat?
Yes, that would be good. Thank you. Just got it open now. Understanding language. Yes, that's definitely close to the bottom. Absolutely, because that we definitely need to be able to understand the language before we can use it. Absolutely. Attention and listening. Yes, that's definitely near the bottom as well. There's just one more thing that comes below all of those, which is social interaction. So that kind of encompasses all of these aspects together. We need social interaction to be able to do any of these parts of language as well. So that's what's at the bottom. Let's think about what's at the top. So can you think what might be right on the top of that pyramid? We know it's not attention and listening, understanding language, or social interaction. It's going to be one of the other 3. You pop that in the chat. Using language, yeah, that's near the top. Yes, speech sounds. So speech sounds, we're going to put that right at the top. So, okay, if you move us on to the next slide, we've got the pyramid as it should be. There we go. So here's our language development pyramid. And really, this just shows us that we need to be building on these skills kind of in turn. So starting off by considering social interaction, and then building up all the way up to speech sounds. And the arrow on the side lets us know that we need to be using interaction strategies. You've all identified that interaction is one of those key parts of communication. So we're using that to develop our language as we move up through the language pyramid. Okay, so the last little bit of theory before we move on to the strategies, I can't really do a webinar without talking about the means, reasons, and opportunities model, because I think it's the most useful bit of theory we can think about really when we talk about communication. It is the most practical model, I think, when we think about what makes functional communication. And when we talk about functional communication, we're talking about communication that's useful and meaningful for that person. So the means, reasons, and opportunities model says that we need these 3 things to happen, and they all need to happen. They're all equal. None is better than the other. So we need the means, which is how we communicate. That's that list of things that we talked about on the first slide. Speech, non-verbal communication, signing, also includes AAC, so whether that's paper-based or electronic. And if we don't have the means, then there's no way to communicate. We also need the reasons to communicate, which is why we communicate. So that's linking back to Martin Pistorius when he mentioned about saying, can you pass the salt, as a direction or a request. But we've also got other things like commenting or questions, gaining attention, greeting someone, saying goodbye, and really importantly as well, negating, so saying no. I think that's a function of communication that we often don't give as much importance to as is required, but that's a really important one to be able to develop. So if we don't provide those reasons, then there's no point in communicating. And then the last thing to consider in this model is the opportunity. So we need to be thinking about the when, the where, and the with whom. So whether that's in school or at home, out and about, are we doing this at playtime, bath time? Have we got key communication times during the day, or are we using this all of the time? Who we're communicating with, and whether there's kind of that shared language and shared interest as well. And we need those opportunities, otherwise there's no chance of communicating. Okay, so we're going to get started on the strategies now. I wanted to start off with this one because I think this is the most important one that we can all do as communication partners. It should be the easiest, but I think people do struggle sometimes with this one, and it is presuming competence. So when we're not sure what students can learn, presume competence and the ability to learn. I think this is something that we really try and keep at the top of our minds at ATtherapy. I'm sure we've all got examples of when we've come across students where this hasn't been the case, and it's really lovely when the team around them start presuming competence and you really see that development. So some key tips you can do here is to focus on the abilities that you can see when and not the developmental level or the age. And you can do this by really respecting the students, respecting their privacy, but also really important to speak to them when you're in there, and not speak around them or above them. I think presuming competence can be a little bit, the struggle is when someone's got like an expressive communication need, then it can be harder for them to kind of show you what they know. And that's when we really need to be making sure that we are presuming competence as well. Okay. Number 2 is looking again at the bottom or towards the bottom of that language pyramid, and we're looking at play. So I think play can be kind of underestimated in how important it is. And when we talk about play, we're not just talking about, the under 5s kind of preschool level of play. Really, I want to be talking about play with all ages, and that's in adults as well. And we've talked at ATtherapy about using play within our sessions and what that looks like with older clients and kind of that playful manner in which we might run our sessions. But kind of bringing it back down to more typical examples of using it with younger children. The way you would be doing this is to watch what the child's engaged in. It's always going to be more interesting to them, if it's motivated by them, and copy what they're doing. So depending on the stage of play that they're at, you might be able to join in, and they might accept that you are able to join in with that, and then you can model some turn taking. If they're not quite at that point yet, you might just be getting a similar toy and then sitting down next to them and playing alongside. And play is really, really important for encouraging joint attention, which is when we've got one person communicating, the other person maybe listening, and we're both looking towards one shared item or object or person. So it's that kind of triangle of attention. And I've put here that please don't be tempted to lead the play, but you can extend it. So if you're playing with some blocks as you are, as this picture shows, then you might be putting on maybe another type of block that a child hasn't put on before, but you're not suddenly leading it down into playing police stations and all sorts of things, but just extending it here and there as you can. Okay, so third strategy we've got is links back to number 2, but it's get down to their level. And wherever they are, I think speech and language therapists were always kind of in random corners of classrooms or on floors of the wherever the young person is. And the important part of this is so that they can see your face and you can see theirs. So we're not talking about eye contact here, because that's not something that all children find comfortable. But really we're talking about reading those facial expressions and those non-verbal cues. And it's much, much easier to do that when you're nice and not too close, but nice and close to be able to see their face. And you can encourage that joint attention by putting toys and objects near your face as well, because it's then a lot closer to be able to just shift attention from your face to the object if you're holding it next to your face there as well. Okay, so number 4 is imitate. And I've put the intensive interaction logo on this slide because I wanted to just kind of talk in general terms about some of the principles of intensive interaction here. I'm not going to be going into too much detail about it. So if you do find this slide interesting, please do check out their website. They've got lots of really good videos about intensive interaction and lots of nice examples about it. But in terms of this strategy, we're talking about copying movements and sounds. And this really ties back into that first pillar of the communication triangle. So that's the social interaction part, because intensive interaction is all about those language kind of fundamentals. And they encourage physical proximity. They're looking at breathing rhythms, behavioral patterns, listening, eye contact where that's appropriate for students, looking and eye gaze, eye transfer, giving brief attention to another person, shared attention, vocalizations, turn taking, and understanding facial expression. So it's supporting all of those things and more. And it can feel a little bit silly when you do this the first time. I think as adults, we feel much more awkward than the children who we're supporting. But once you've kind of given it a good go a few times, it can be so powerful when you do this for the first time. It really, I've seen some wonderful examples of this. Really, the key things are to just be available to that young person, and make sure you're looking at their cues about when you might kind of start a period of intensive interaction. And again, you're not being directive, you're being led by them and really responding to them and their sounds, their movements, their cues, whether that's breath or body movements or vocalizations. Okay, so the 5th strategy is to use gesture and signs. And the reason we suggest to do this is because it helps support understanding. And there's loads of extra information that we give without even realizing when we use kind of natural gesture. So if, for example, I said to you, the toilets are up the stairs, I haven't said that that's going up a spiral staircase, but you might have kind of already understood that just because I did a circular motion with my hand rather than just, pointing upwards. So there's loads of little bits of info that we give without even realizing with natural gesture. But of course, when we use something like a proper signing system, so something like Makaton or Sign Along or Sign Supported English, all of those use signs alongside spoken English or spoken language to support the understanding of those words. And that's really because you then get the visual information and you get the auditory information. So it's getting processed in the brain in a couple of different places. So if you don't have any particular training in one signing system or another, then please just continue to use your natural gesture. It will be more helpful than you think. And if you do have a particular signing system that maybe one of the schools that you're working use, then being consistent with that is the most helpful thing you can do. I think it's interesting to note that pointing is actually also a gesture, and we're often working on kind of pointing skills when we're working on AAC development and things like that. So this is an interesting piece of research that just shows how much gesture can support language. So it found that children of parents who use a high percentage of gesture when the children are 14 months, they then have a larger vocabulary at 42 months. So that's really nice evidence there that just supports that language development. And you can see that working on the language pyramid. So using that gesture and that visual information down there is supporting the words closer to the top. Okay, number 6. So modelling. We use this term a lot when we're talking about AAC, but it does refer to when we're talking about speech and language as well. So when we're talking about using words, what we mean when we say modelling is providing that correct word or phrase. So we're not saying, oh, that's wrong, or kind of pointing that out. And we're not asking them to then repeat what we've said either. All we're doing is just providing the correct word or phrase, and that's the model that we're giving them to hear. And you can use the kind of tone of voice in your stress to highlight the attention to the correct word. So if the child says the bus goes down the hill, you might respond, yes, the bus is going down the hill. And the picture of the bike is to say that we don't give people bikes and expect them to know how to ride it straight away. So we need to be providing that model and that instruction all the time. Okay, number 7. So the next kind of bank of strategies are all going to be about the language that we use when we're working with children and young people. So these are all strategies about how we can modify our own language. And this one is a really nice, simple one you can do about narrating the day. So you can talk about what the child is doing across the whole of their day. And there's absolutely tons of examples and opportunities that come about, whether they're planned or not planned. So things like washing your hands, losing a coat, seeing a squirrel, all of those can be really rich language opportunities. And we call this mapping. So this is when we map the language onto what the child is doing. And what's really important for this strategy is that we're doing it in the here and now. So we're not talking about what happened yesterday or what's going to happen tomorrow. We're talking about what the child is doing there. So that mapping is happening at that time, and they're hearing those words that relate to what they're doing in that moment. And of course, it's going to be more motivational and more relevant to that child if it's something that they're enjoying. So if you can follow their lead and do this with kind of their interest, then that's probably going to go in a little bit more. And we might say that mapping is saying what the child might be saying if they could. Okay, so the next one is about adding and extending. So we can think about this in relation to words or grammar. So if we're talking about grammar, we might be adding in like the tense information. That might be the key piece of information. But the rule is to add one more piece of information. So if the child says car, we could have a number of responses to extend that. We might give them a colour information. So red car, you might add a verb, car go, or another adjective, fast car. So this doesn't just apply to speech. If the child is non-speaking and they reach for some more snack, then you might be adding that language in and saying more. And you're adding there to their gesture by reaching for that snack. Okay, number 9 is about asking fewer questions. So you probably heard this strategy before. And this really comes down to the principle of we want to be teaching language rather than testing it. So questions, they increase the kind of communication demand that we're putting on children, and it can be really kind of anxiety provoking and puts a lot of pressure on children. So if you can, try and reduce your questions. There will obviously be times where you have to ask a question, and where you can, if you can make them open-ended, that's a nicer way of asking them. But if you can, then commenting instead of questions really open up that dialogue a little bit more. So there's some nice examples that Ellie's made on the right here. So instead of saying, what's that? You could say, you have a ball. Or instead of saying, what are you doing? You can say, you are washing. And again, these tie into those kind of narrate the day examples. There's a lot of kind of there's a link between a lot of these examples, as you'll see, a lot of these strategies. So one tip you can say to yourself is to comment instead of questions. And I tend to use the phrase "I wonder" a lot as well, which kind of turns a lot of questions into statements. So I think that's a nice tip you can do as well. So number 10, reducing language. So when we talk about reducing language, what we mean is in relation to those kind of expectations for the child to be replying. So when we're talking about instructions or questions or anything like that, we want to be using keywords when we're doing that. And you can find out what level your child or young person is by asking your speech and language therapist. They should be able to give you that information. So we want to be modeling one keyword level above what that young person is using. So keywords are the words in the sentence that must be understood in order to follow an action. So if you point to the door and say, go and line up, and all the other children in the class start doing that, there's actually no words really that you need to understand there, because you've had the visual gesture to be able to follow, and all of those social cues where the children are also able to follow each other to the door. So we're talking here about just the words that provide information without anything else, any other clues. So in these 3 boxes, the examples are with 1 teddy, 1 spoon and 1 cup. There's only one keyword here when you say give the spoon to the teddy, and that's because you've got a choice of the spoon and the cup, but just 1 teddy. In the next box there, you've got a teddy and a rabbit, so there's a choice there between a teddy or a rabbit, and there's also a choice between the spoon and the cup. So you've got 2 information carrying words in the instruction, give the cup to the teddy. And then in the last box, although this one might look more complicated because it's got a jumper as well involved, it's still just 2 keywords, because we've got 2 teddies, one of them's wearing a jumper, one of them isn't, and a spoon and a cup. So give the spoon to the teddy wearing a jumper. Okay, so number 11, simplify your language. So what I'm talking about here is really the difference between core words and fringe words. So core words are most of the words that we use to make up most of our sentences and our instructions. So that's about, I mean, there's different figures, but about 80% of our words. And fringe vocabulary is the parts that make it meaningful for specific kind of topics or areas. So, for example, if we're talking about the Romans in school, your fringe vocab might be tunic and sword and Colosseum. Really crucial words to be talking about the Romans, but you're not going to be using that kind of vocab most of the time in your everyday life. So where possible, we want to be keeping things to a core words where we can. Obviously, there will be a need to add in fringe vocab at some times, but where we can, keep things short and to the point, and we want to be supporting those words using our facial expressions and tone and things like pauses and things as well. So number 12 is about the order of our language. So instructions are complicated at the best of times, but really can make things even more complicated when we get the language, when we get the order kind of a little bit muddled up. So time words are really complicated concepts, and lots of children and young people do struggle with them. So things like first, next, before, after can be quite tricky to understand, which means that they'll naturally be picking out those keywords from the sentence, and they'll tend to be following those in order. So if you said something like, we'll go to grandma's on the bus, but we need to go shopping first, the keywords there are grandma, bus, shopping. You might think that we're going to grandma's house, then we'll go on the bus, and then we'll go shopping. But actually, that's not what you said at all. So can we reframe this question, this statement, sorry, and say, okay, now shopping, next bus, then grandma's house. That's simplified it right down, and we've put it in the right order of when things are happening. That's going to be a whole load easier to understand. Okay, number 13, use positive words. So two reasons really. One is, I think we all know that it's much, much nicer to be praised for things that we're doing well rather than told off for things that we're not doing quite so well. So I think we see this strategy used a lot in schools, which can be really nice. So using positive language to praise students maybe around the child that are doing the thing that you might be asking them to do. And that acts as an additional social cue as well. And the other reason for using positive words is because they can be, negative words can be a little bit more complicated to understand as well. So if you do need to use a negative, then simple ones such as no or stop, and then to reinforce that with either a sign or a facial expression, are much easier to understand than complex negatives like don't or can't or won't or isn't. Okay, so that's our kind of language-based strategies all gone through now. Number 14 is about pausing. Again, I think this one can feel a little bit awkward to do when you're doing it for the first time. And we all like to fill the silence. But what we're actually doing there is making things a whole load more complicated for someone that's got any additional processing needs. So the general rule we say is give 10 seconds of processing time. That feels like a really long time when you're doing it. But I promise that if you're giving that opportunity for them to process what you're saying before responding, it's going to make things a whole load easier for them to respond. Okay, so number 15, using visuals. So I think we all use visuals all of the time across our life. We do it when we're driving and look at road signs, when we're washing stuff, or trying to kind of build some flat pack furniture. But they're great because they're really adaptable, portable, they don't cost too much, and they can be used in a lot of different situations. There's a few other reasons why they're really, really good, and that's because they're permanent, so they allow us time to process. So going back to that last one, if someone's got a processing difficulty, then visuals are going to stay around longer than your words will. And because of that, they can help build independence, and they can reduce kind of anxiety as well. And they don't come with all of the tone and the stress and the facial expressions that words do. So they don't have an attitude. So some people find them much simpler to understand as well. So there's a few things to think about just when we are using visuals. One of them is how abstract the visual is. So depends on the, I think that should say the word actually rather than child. So it depends on the word, but words like finish are a little bit more difficult to depict, and all of these signs on the right, they are all different signs to show finish, and you can see how much variety there are there. So that's kind of why it's really important to use consistent symbols when we've got, especially with those more abstract words, things like, you know, table and chairs. It's a little bit more obvious what that's depicting. And there's loads of different ways that you can use visuals, either at home or in the classroom. So you can use activity boards. You might have single symbols on key rings, like around your lanyard, or maybe the child has some like on a belt loop as well. You might have full day timetables at the front of the classroom or next to the door at home, but then use now and next boards to break that down a little bit more. You might have symbol lists of kind of naming vocab around the house, using social stories. So those are symbol supported stories to kind of break concepts down, and schedules to support personal care as well. Okay, so number 16 is using a total communication approach. So this one, you can describe it a little bit like a bit of a pick and mix, which is why that picture is there, because it's combining a lot of different ways of communicating. So it includes all of the ones we've been talking about. So signs and gesture, objects of reference, body movements, facial expression, using eye gaze, intensive interaction, the use of electronic or paper-based AAC. Really, the important thing to consider here is that it's the people with the communication difficulties who should be allowed the opportunity to use these forms of communication. It's down to us as communication partners to learn these other ways of communicating. And the next slide shows a really nice kind of quote that I think summarizes a total communication approach a little bit. So it says, connect with each other, not just in one way, but in as many ways as possible. It's a basic human need, a basic human right. And more than this, it's a basic human power. So it's coming back down to connection as well, which I really like the link there too. So number 17, again, you might have come across this one before, offering choices. So starting off with two can work well, and it doesn't matter whether, well, your speech language therapist can help you to decide whether you might be offering these as objects or whether they're kind of at the level of choosing symbols yet, or whether you're doing this with words or signs. But we'd be offering that choice, pausing 10 seconds, and then using any means of communication to interpret that response. So whether they're reaching towards one of those choices, whether they're pointing to it and smiling, or maybe they might be signing or saying the word back to you. And then, you know, if they're not using language, you might be modeling that language. to them. So you can see how all of these strategies kind of tie into each other as well. Okay, so number 18. So this one, I think ties really nicely into the means, reasons, and opportunities model, sorry. Because we're talking here about the opportunities and the reasons for communicating. And this is a really nice way to kind of gently, so we call it gentle sabotage or sometimes communication temptations. They mean the same thing. They're all strategies to adapt, manipulate, or control the activity or environment. So we're aiming to give this person an opportunity and a reason to communicate. And this can be really, really useful for clients that are working on maybe initiating communication as well. So there's a few different examples here that you can try, but there are lots of different other examples as well. So things that you can do are maybe using a toy that's difficult to use. So things like wind-up toys are really good for that. They're quite hard to use with small fingers. Placing motivating items in a clear box and container. So we want them to be able to see the toy inside or the item inside, but we're just making it a little bit more difficult to get. So putting it in a box that would need maybe a communication partner to open up. You might be a bit forgetful, so you might give them their bag of crisps without opening it, or maybe their yogurt without the spoon. Or number 4, you might make a mistake on purpose as well. So you might give them a fork instead of a spoon, or a ruler instead of a pencil. So these are things that might cause a little bit of frustration to start with, but hopefully we're there as communication partners to be modeling that response, and the items are there. Overall, so we're not aiming to kind of increase frustrations. The aim is to be providing that opportunity for initiation and the reason that they want to communicate. And the last one there was just about putting it, sorry, Kerry, you didn't mention that last one. It was about putting it on a box, on a shelf at the top, so similar to putting it in a box. So number 19, use burst pause activities. So these support loads of different functions, but things like anticipation, so building anticipation, really important to communication, because we need to wait before responding. Cause and effect, and of course attention and listening as well. So you can think of these as lots of kind of people-based games, so ready, steady, go games, 1, 2, 3 games. We'd be looking at increasing the length of time of that pause before starting the activity again, to kind of increase that anticipation as they're developing. So singing songs and leaving a pause for them to join in, or for them to look at you, for you to keep singing it. And any activity that kind of naturally stops is really good for this. So again, wind-up toys, or a therapist's favourite activity, bubbles. Those are all great because they need to be restarted again. So this brings us on to the last strategy, which is a really simple one, and it's just about having fun. I think it's much easier for it's much more engaging for the child or young person if you're having fun as well. I think the sessions that I do where I'm kind of much more engaged are the ones that tend to go a little bit better, and they're also much more fun for the young person as well. So that's definitely something to bear in mind. Have a bit of fun within sessions, or within your school or at home. And I've just got one final quote to kind of finish off that with. I'm not sure who authored this one, but I wanted to include it because I thought it was a nice quote. So language is our portal to meaning making, connection, healing, learning and self-awareness. Having access to the right words can open up entire universes. When we don't have the language to talk about what we're experiencing, our ability to make sense of what's happening and share it with others is severely limited. Without accurate language, we struggle to get the help we need. We don't always regulate or manage our emotions and experiences in a way that allows us to move through them productively, and our self-awareness is diminished. Language shows us that naming an experience doesn't give that experience more power, it gives us the power of understanding and meaning. Okay, so we can summarize today now. I think it's about right kind of length of time, which is good. So we've looked at what communication is and why it's important. We've looked at the language development, and we've considered the means, reasons, and opportunities model to talk about functional communication. And then we've gone through 20 strategies to support communication, which hopefully you'll be able to use now when working with some of your young people. I'm going to hand it back over to Kerry now to take questions.
Thank you, Caitlin. That was fantastic. What a brilliant speech. And I really liked that last quote. That was really nice quote. So I'm going to just quickly, before we do some questions, I was just going to quickly start a poll. If you can fill in the poll, please, that would be amazing. While we're doing that, if you have any questions for Caitlin, can you pop them in the chat, please, and we can go through them. Oh, we've got one already by the looks of it. Oh, someone's saying great webinar. Thank you, Caitlin.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So any questions at all or comments? I think it's really useful, that whole webinar, Caitlin, for thinking about all of the people that we work with and live with, because it applies to all ages, doesn't it?
It does. And I gave a lot of examples there about kind of younger children, but I think, yeah, they apply to all of our clients, and especially as I was saying about play in particular. I think that's so important to be giving opportunities for play throughout our lifespan.
Absolutely, all ages.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've not had any more questions come in at the moment, but if anyone has any questions that they would like to ask Caitlin, then please do get in touch with us. I am just going to go on to the next slide to let you know about some resources that are available. So we've got lots of training videos on our ATtherapy YouTube channel. There's lots of different things on there. So have a little look, tell people you know about it. There's lots of freebies and speech language therapy strategies. And we also have an Instagram account, which we give away some freebies and lots of different videos, etc. So we've got the ATtherapy Limited one, ATtherapy LE, and various ones of us have got ATtherapy Instagram accounts. You can also keep up to date on the ATtherapy team and our clients on our ATtherapy Facebook account. Or let me have a quick check. There was a message there. Someone else has said, thanks very much, Caitlin. That was really helpful. And it was indeed. Our upcoming training events, we've got lots of things going on. Please do use the QR code to book on, but we've got some Makaton training that we do, levels 1 to 4. We have Makaton trainers at ATtherapy. We've got talking mats training, which will be fantastic. Again, we've got a trainer at ATtherapy. AAC building blocks, we have those training sessions regularly. Lots of free CPD webinars and podcasts. Every month we have a webinar. Next month we haven't quite finalized the title, but we're well on the way there, so there will be a webinar next month. Just keep your eyes and ears peeled for more information. So thank you so much, Caitlin. Thank you everyone for coming, and please do be in touch if you would like to ask any questions. This will be sent out, will be uploaded. the video will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. So please pass on the word to anyone that you know that they can come and watch it. So thank you very much again. I'm going to stop recording now.